King Ramses. In the first season of Courage the Cowardly Dog, a stolen Egyptian stone slab turns up outside the farmhouse. Eustace Baga, greedy and stupid in roughly equal measure, realizes it's worth money, so he hides it. That night, something comes to the door, asking for the slab back. The figure is waterlogged, hollow-eyed, its face slack. It doesn't walk, it drifts. And it never threatens anyone. It just demands the slab back, loudly but calmly. Eustace says no. The figure leaves. It comes back 3 times. Each time, it brings a plague. First, the house floods. Then loud music fills the rooms and won't stop. Then thousands of insects arrive and eat the house down to nothing. Only then does Eustace give in. For a lot of kids, this was the exact moment it stopped feeling like a cartoon. And it wasn't the plagues. It was that King Ramses looked like he came from somewhere else, as if the show had been interrupted by something that never belonged inside it. That instinct wasn't wrong. Ramses was rendered in CGI, while everything else in the show was hand-drawn, 2-dimensional animation. The ground, the fog, the sky, all of it drawn by hand. Everything except Ramses. He's made of a different material than everything around him. Your eyes caught the seam before you even knew the word for it. The show's creator, John Dilworth, came out of experimental animation. He never treated the horror and courage as a joke wearing a horror costume. For him, it was the opposite. The horror was the point. The comedy was just the packaging. The episode, King Ramses' Curse, was never edited, never pulled, never quietly retired. It still airs exactly as it did back then. The Polar Express. The year was 2004, and Robert Zemeckis released one of the biggest animated films of the year, adapted from a beloved children's picture book by Chris Van Allsburg. At the end, audiences walked out of theaters struggling to describe what they'd all noticed. The people in the film were rendered in astonishing detail, and yet somehow they were deeply and specifically wrong. The most common description was also the simplest. It looks like everyone in this film is dead. To make the movie, they used performance capture. Real actors were recorded, then mapped onto digital characters. The bodies moved correctly, the mouths moved correctly, but real human eyes make tiny adjustments all the time. And that's what tells us someone is alive. In the film, they never did. Those eyes were wide open, detailed, wet, reflective, and completely empty. This effect has a name, and it was first described decades before the technology existed to cause it. In 1970, the Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori called it the uncanny valley. The idea is this: the more human-like something becomes, the more we like it, right up until it's almost perfect, but with a few wrong details. Then the feeling flips. A cartoon face is fine. A photorealistic face with one wrong detail doesn't read as normal anymore. And the reason for that is the unsettling part. Mori believed it's our instinct working as a corpse detector, an eeriness that evolved to protect us from the dead. So when you watch this movie, your brain isn't reacting to bad animation. It's reacting to what looks like a room full of well-rendered corpses. The Polar Express is now one of the most cited examples of this effect. It's used to teach the concept, but it was still a commercial success, and it still runs on television every single December. Kids still watch it. Ren and Stimpy. Season 2, Episode 17 of Ren and Stimpy, Stimpy's Fan Club, premiered on Nickelodeon in 1993. It looked like a normal kids' cartoon, a chihuahua and a cat, rubber hose animation, and candy colors. In the episode, Ren is jealous that all the fan mail is for Stimpy, and none of it is for him. Night falls. Stimpy is asleep, but Ren is still awake. Then the screen goes black. Everything drops away. No background, no room, nothing. The only things left are Ren's face and hands. And Ren starts calmly, quietly, talking himself into murdering Stimpy in his sleep. A show made for kids suddenly has a silent black murder scene. It's a complete reversal of everything the show usually is. It feels like it's coming apart. And yet, none of this was a mistake in production. It was exactly how it was meant to be. The animators stripped the background down to nothing on purpose. This episode was banned in the UK for violence and for the murder attempt. It was one of the last things Ren and Stimpy's creator, John Crickfalusi, did at Nickelodeon before he was fired, over creative conflicts and missed production deadlines. After his firing, Nickelodeon brought in a different studio to rebuild the episode from what he'd left behind, and then it aired on a children's network, Return to Oz. In 1985, Disney released Return to Oz, an unofficial sequel to the 1939 Wizard of Oz. The The movie opens with Dorothy back in Kansas, sleepless. Concerned, Aunt Em takes her to a clinic for electroshock therapy. Before the treatment can happen, Dorothy escapes outside, into a storm. Soon, she wakes up in Oz. But Oz is ruined. The yellow brick road is torn up. The city is in pieces. People have been turned to stone. Then the Wheelers find her. They chase her, and she runs to Princess Mombi. Mombi takes her to a hall of human heads, around 30 of them, that she swaps depending on her mood. When Dorothy tries to steal one, the headless body screams at her. Parents took their children to this movie expecting funny talking lions and ruby slippers. It didn't even feel like a Disney film. It felt like a horror film that had been mislabeled. The reason this so-called kids movie plays more like horror is its director, Walter Murch. He's one of the greatest film editors and sound designers alive. Two of the films he worked on are Apocalypse Now and The Godfather, but Return to Oz was his directorial debut, and the only film he ever directed. Disney fired him about 5 weeks into shooting because he was behind schedule and the executives hated the footage. Then George Lucas flew to the London set from Japan and personally argued to get Murch rehired, offering to do it himself if they refused. Coppola and Spielberg backed him too. Murch was rehired and he got final cut. But the Wheelers and Mombi weren't Murch's inventions. They came straight out of L. Frank Baum's original Oz novels. Those books were always like that. The movie was a total flop, and it was called Too Dark for Kids. Today, it's a cult film, but in the end, every part that scared you came from the source material. Watership Down, a British animated film released in 1978, adapted from the novel by Richard Adams. The animation was made with soft watercolors. The story was set in the English countryside. It was about rabbits looking for a home. Then, around halfway through, everything flips. A warren fills with sand. Dozens of rabbits are trapped underground with no way out, gasping for air. Rabbits claw at each other to get through. One chokes to death under a wire snare. The sky fills with blood. For most people, watching this, or even part of it, was an accident. Adults assumed it was a cartoon about bunnies made for kids. It's nowhere close. This was the softest possible packaging for a genuine horror story. In 1978, Watership Down was originally rated U in the UK, meaning suitable for all ages with no warnings. The board later admitted it had received complaints about that rating almost every year since. But for 44 years, the rating didn't change. Even after those 44 years in 2022, it finally moved from U to PG, but not because of the complaints. It changed only because the film was resubmitted and reviewed under modern guidelines. In the end, it was reclassified for mild violence, threat, and bloody images. The film never changed in those 44 years. Neither did the U rating. It took an administrative accident to make someone finally look at it and give it the rating it obviously should have had all along. Coraline. In 2009, the film adaptation of Neil Gaiman's 2002 novella, Coraline, premiered from the studio Laika. It opens with Coraline crawling through a small locked door and finding a copy of her life, one that's better in almost every way. In this other world, there's a doppelganger of her mother. She's everything Coraline wishes her real mom would be, except instead of normal eyes, the other mother has black buttons. And she wants to remove Coraline's eyes too, and replace them with buttons of her own. For a lot of kids, this was the single most frightening thing they'd ever seen. But it wasn't the plot, and it wasn't the buttons. It was something else, something harder to name. It was the texture. That texture wasn't rendering, it was stop motion. The characters were physical puppets, moved by hand and shot one frame at a time. Everything was filmed in real life under real light. Laika was the first studio ever to pair 3D printing with stop motion. They printed 6,333 replaceable parts, just for the upper and lower halves of Coraline's face. Combined, those halves could make over 200,000 different expressions. So why is the other mother so frightening? She isn't CGI, she isn't drawn. She's a real physical object, casting a real shadow, doing something that cannot happen. Not an impossible thing, but a real thing, behaving in an impossible way. And it was, and still is, marketed as a children's film.